You have tuned in to the E-commerceaholic. My name is TJ Gamble, and I am here to help you get more from your e-commerce store. Today, we're going to be talking about mobile-first e-commerce design, and this is an interesting topic to me. You know, as an agency owner, more and more traffic we're seeing on the web is mobile traffic, and historically, mobile traffic doesn't convert as well. And you know, obviously, there's some devices that have to continue to advance, but I believe if you have a great mobile designed website, a mobile-first designed website, then you can get those conversion numbers up where you need them to be. So I have a great guest today, Joseph. Joseph, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about JH.
All right then. Yeah, as TJ says, my name is Joseph Russell. You can just call me Joe for the rest of the evening. I'm head of design at an agency here in the UK called JH. It's actually the company's 9th birthday tomorrow, and the boss's Jamie's birthday today. So happy birthday to Jamie and the team, I suppose. So we obviously specialize in designing, building e-commerce websites, and we specialize in doing that on the Magento platform. We've had a long-term relationship with Magento, and that's reflected in our partnership status, and in the fact that this year we ran the UK's Magento conference, Meet Magento UK, where we had about 500 plus people, merchants, partners, agencies coming together and sharing their knowledge. So in terms of e-commerce, in terms of Magento, we're absolutely right there in terms of the UK, Europe, and the world as well.
So was JH a birthday gift from Jamie to himself? Is that like, how do you start a business on your birthday?
I'm well, I've been at JH for about 5.5 years, coming up to 6 years in October. So I wasn't there at the genesis of the business, but Jamie had been working for other people and working for himself, and really wanted to create a business that did a much better job at things. A business that was producing better work, having better relationships with clients, but also somewhere where he and the people he employed would have that opportunity to learn and grow and enjoy the work they're doing. And that's what he set out to do all those years ago, and that's the life we live at JH now. It's a fantastic culture, really supportive, really kind of in it together, and really kind of striving for excellence with everything we do. So yeah, that's why he started it, and I think that's what attracts a lot of us to go work there.
Yeah, definitely some great talent on the team. If you keep up with the Magento community, I'm sure you'll recognize some of the people that work at JH. And there's not a lot of, there's a few. There's not a ton of agencies that have I guess the amount of staff that you're familiar with if you just kind of follow social media, speaking engagements, things like that. JH definitely gets around, as they say. So great reputation in the community. And I was reaching out on Twitter trying to find someone to do this mobile first design topic. I was like, I want to talk about this. Who is the person that I need to have on to discuss this conversation? Who is known as the mobile design guy? And your name was brought up, and so anytime somebody posts a name, I'm like, okay, let me check out the resume. Let me see if this guy actually knows his stuff, or if someone's just trying to get their buddy on. And apparently, you are the 3-time Magento Imagine consecutive three-time Magento Imagine Best Mobile Design Award winner. Is that correct? Like, what goes into, I guess, winning an award like that?
Yeah, it's quite an achievement, really, isn't it? I think we're maybe the only one to have achieved that at the Imagine Awards. A hat trick like that. I think to win one of those awards is a great achievement. A lot of hard work goes in across the team at JH to win an award like this. Every member of the team in every department is contributing something that really adds up to the project we deliver to our clients and the outcomes it achieves for them. But I think to do it 3 years running, I think that really reflects the culture I was talking about before of wanting to do good work and enjoy it. That we won our first one back in 2016, and then 2017, and then this year in 2018. And the reality is things haven't stayed still in those years. Things have moved on, and we've had to move on with that. And we've always been pushing the boundary in terms of design, in terms of technology, in terms of the service we give to our clients. And I think those awards, that consecutive wins, really reflects that desire to keep pushing ourselves, basically. So yeah.
So what's the criteria for that award? Like, I mean, best mobile design. There's, that's a little bit generic, or a little bit, based on opinion or subjective, I guess. What goes into, like, what's the judging criteria, or did they announce the judging criteria? Do you just submit a form and then you get an award? I want to know, because I'm gonna try to win it. I'm gonna try to end the streak. Maybe this year, maybe next year. I'm gonna go after the streak. How do I do that?
Well, I think first of all, TJ, I've got to the bad news that I think we've got a couple of projects in the works right now that I've already got pegged as potential winners. Maybe for best mobile design, maybe for one of the other categories this year. So yeah. So what's involved? Obviously, we don't know 100% what happens in the judging process. I think that's an important part of any award system, that there's a level of independence there. But actually, first of all, you've got to do the work. You've got to have a great client. We have some really, really brilliant clients. You've got to really work hard with them, work together, push each other, produce a great piece of work. I think if you're not doing that, then okay, go start there first. I think then in terms of the awards process, we put together our submissions. You've only got a very short number of words. So you've got to tell a real compelling story there. We've got a story to tell. We can say, this is what we've done. These are the challenges we've overcome. And ultimately, these are the results we've delivered. And, on those projects, we've achieved great things in mobile. Things where, yes, we've delivered great uplifts for desktop and tablet, but when you're particularly getting down to smartphone, that's where we've really achieved double and triple digit improvements for people, whether that's in conversion rate or orders or revenue, or some of the engagement metrics if you're looking at those. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind. Yeah, you've got to do a great project. You've got to have great results, and then you got to make your pitch. You got to throw it in there, and fingers crossed you make the shortlist, and then if you're really lucky, you win.
So if everybody wants to go check them out, what sites have you won these awards for? Like, what are the 3 sites that have garnered the hardware?
Sure. Okay, then. So let's start back in 2016 first. So our first win was for Sunspell, and the URL for that is sunspell.com, sunspel.com. They are a kind of luxury clothing company. They kind of do luxury essentials. So, think about really great t-shirts and underwear and loungewear. They're about 150 years old. They're actually based probably about a 20-minute drive from here. So they're actually a great local business with a great story and a great product. And if you've never heard of Sunspell, then you might have seen it worn by people like Christian Bale in the Batman movies and by Daniel Craig in the James Bond movies. Whenever they're just kicking back in a t-shirt or a nice jumper or something like that. So there's incredible story there, great heritage with that brand, and really they were looking to go responsive, to embrace that booming mobile traffic, while still kind of conveying the quality of the products and telling a great brand story. They do a lot of work, with their involving their kind of heritage and their story, and a lot of crossovers with other brands and creators who kind of share that thinking. So that was our first one back in 2016. The second one, 2017, was for Perch and Paro. That's perchandparrow.com. So perchandparrow.com. They're a designer furniture startup, selling designer pieces direct to the consumer. So cutting out the high street stores, cutting out those overheads there, and then that way they can sell that quality product at a lower price. And in the UK, that's a really competitive market right now, with the likes of Made and Swoon, who've both previously worked with JH as well. So obviously we had that pedigree working with that kind of client, and so obviously Perch and Paro starting up, were like, well, we want to get a bit of the JH touch on this project. So we already had a lot of experience designing for that sector. We were able to bring all of that into the project. And what was really unique to them is they had a range of made-to-order products with kind of 100+ different fabrics. So how do you give people that ability to work through the different fabrics, the different colors, maybe pick a few to get sent home as a sample, and then customize that product, and still make that work well on mobile and still make it fast. And there was a lot of work that went into iterating that one, into doing a lot of testing on real devices, a lot of attention on speed there. And I think that's one where there's so much credit on that one to the front end developers who are on that project. I think a lot of work went into particularly finessing the interactions there, making a really, really fast site. And then most recently, 2018, was for Neom Organics. That's neomorganics.com. So neomorganics.com for everyone who's trying to still keep up and type it in. They are a well-being company. So all of their products revolve around, the therapeutic benefits of essential oils. So they have things like diffusers and candles and, body oil, bath oils and body creams. And I think they've actually just come out with an electronic diffuser that will, throughout the day give a really nice kind of relaxing aroma. And what's really interesting with them, they have a really high quality product. Again, a great story to tell there, and a lot of tested and proven claims in terms of how their products actually help people. And really, the challenge there was to, in their move over to Magento, their upgrade in terms of what they wanted to do with Magento. On the design side, we were kind of looking at how we could clean up the user journeys there. How can we guide them to, okay, here's the sleep range if you need something to help you with sleep, or here's the energy range if you need something for that. So we were looking at how to insert new bits into the story, how to explain the products, explain the benefits. And I think this is another project where we then paired that user experience with some really, really great technical work. And I know since that initially launched, again, the front end team and the back end team, our developers have done some really clever stuff in terms of bringing loading times down by optimizing the assets that are there, the bundling of JavaScript. I've really got to give a shout out there to Shane Osborne, who's our lead front end developer. He's really been innovating on that front in terms of what we can do with taking Magento and really cutting it down and making it fast, and halving page load times and speeding up the checkout. And if you get the chance to see him talk about that, his kind of preparing for progressive web apps topic, which is at a few Magento conferences around Europe this year, that's definitely one to catch.
Yeah, I believe your winning submission next year had better be a PWA. You think? Is that where you're going with those?
I definitely feel like there's going to be an interest in seeing those. I think obviously Magento are doing some great work at the moment in terms of building out their PWA tools, and I had the opportunity to speak to some of the people working on that, and about some of the things they're trying to do there in terms of the developer tools, but also trying to lead the way in terms of what to then do with those tools once you have them. I think they're doing some great work there to try and lay the foundations for the community to build those kind of solutions on the platform. And I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see what people come up with. I know we're talking to a lot of people at the moment, and we're doing a lot of things with progressive web apps at the moment. But I think it's one of those areas as well where, like any new trend, any new technology that comes along, that it can run the risk of becoming a bit of a buzzword, become a bit of a trendy thing. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about PWAs out there at the moment, and maybe a lot of people kind of just doing a little bit of box ticking to kind of be able to say, yep, it's done. And I think really the really interesting things are going to be where we see people do a lot more headless implementations on Magento, where they can build much more fully fledged kind of slick interactive apps and experiences on top of the platform. I think that's probably going to be the thing to look out for in this category, or if they add a PWA category.
All right, so we're here to provide value to you, and so your questions are important. And I've got some talking points. We could sit here and talk about mobile first design and progressive web apps all day, because that's what I want to talk about. But let's talk about what you want to talk about. Post your questions into the live chat. If you happen to be catching this on replay, post them in the comments, and I will do everything I could do to get you an answer to those. We do have one question in the chat right now from Justin Peters. Thank you, Justin, for watching, and thank you for your question. And Justin asks, any tips for designing a mobile optimized or designing mobile optimized experiences while being true to brand?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Justin. I think what's really useful to do is to start off with your branding. Start off with your core attributes there, and to build out a design system where you can try and infuse the different elements of the interface with those brand touches. So I think it's about clever use of on the interface level, clever use of your typography and colors, and those the little bits that can kind of be visual calling cards for your brand, if you like. But I think stuff like imagery, illustration, iconography play a big part in that as well. I'm sure if everyone's kind of rushed off to have a look at something like Sunspell, or to have a look at something like Neon, you can see they are doing some incredible work with their photography there to set a tone, and Something we'll probably end up talking about in a bit is about, photos and media and how that impacts on mobile and performance. But just because we're talking small screen, just because we're talking about performance, doesn't mean you can't have any imagery. I think it's just about selecting the right imagery. And, that can still be a really, really powerful way of getting across what it is that you're about. So I think in terms of visual stuff, in terms of like how that can convey your brand, that's really important. But let's not forget content as well. I think tone of voice, what you're putting across in the text to people, like that's a massive, massive part of brand and brand experience. And I think a lot of sites would really benefit from investing a lot of time into their content, into their about pages, into their product descriptions, into their USPs and help pages. I think there's so many opportunities there to make small improvements, to those kind of touch points and those parts of the user experience.
All right, and we've got another question in chat here from Tom. Tom is with JetRails. I'm using my, you can't really see it because of the light here, Tom. I'm using my JetRails cup, and I'm enjoying this fantastic 4 roses that you sent me. But I had a little problem with the 4 roses in that I learned a very difficult and valuable lesson this week, in that if you put a full bottle of whiskey in a hot environment, it expands and it will erupt like a champagne bottle. On the bright side, my Dodge Charger SRT8 Super B has a lovely but expensive bourbon air freshener right now because half of this bottle is in my floorboard. But I'm enjoying the rest of it. I appreciate you sending it. And Tom has another question here. And Tom's question is, it's a borderline SEO question, not necessarily a mobile design question, but hey, it's the questions we get. We will post them, and we will see if we can figure out an answer for you here, Tom. And Tom's question is, July 9th, Google announced using page speed in mobile search ranking. How big of a factor does this play with organic rankings? Do you have any metrics around this topic? You have any thoughts there, Joseph, around kind of how page speed being used in those mobile rankings are going to affect websites? You have any SEO background?
Yeah, funnily enough, I previously worked at like a full service marketing agency. So yeah, definitely quite a bit of exposure to SEO, PPC, and the rest of digital marketing in my career. I'll be honest with you, it's too early to really look at rankings and data and see the impact of that. But for me, like the fact that that Google are really putting a lot of emphasis on it is brilliant, because I can go have a really important commercial discussion with clients about why speed's important. If anyone out there is still trying to bang the drum about speed and about optimization and about making smart decisions about what content you put on the site and about what features you put on, I think that's definitely a great argument to be able to take into that discussion now. But I think more generally, for me, whenever we talk to clients about what we can do to improve the mobile experience, number 1, speed, number 2 is speed, and number 3 is speed. It's proven, obviously, we don't have the evidence about Google rankings yet, but there's plenty of research and anecdote that shows that a faster site will convert better. And even if you just think about your own experience of using sites, slow sites are frustrating. It's the truth. So the faster we can make sites, the more that users are going to enjoy them, the more that it means the site's getting out the way and letting them achieve their goals. And so regardless of what Google says, I think it's got to be top priority for user experience. And I think, that's for me is why, it's so important that we've got both, a strong design team at JH, but also a strong development team side by side with that, because it doesn't matter what I produce if it then is like wading through treacle to actually then use it. As I've said earlier, the work that the development team are doing in terms of optimizing the page load times and doing really clever stuff there, that's a godsend for me in terms of being able to deliver a top user experience on mobile and all device categories, to be honest.
We've got another question in the chat here from Bartek. Bartek, thanks for your question. Appreciate you watching. And another great question here. This one really is around if you design mobile first. You start with the mobile design, and I had in my notes to start this live stream with the definition, but we've got such great questions off the bat. I want to dive into those. But you start with the mobile design, you design their website, and then the customer forgets that it is a mobile first design, and they start sending updates or changes, or they have those discussions around what they want modified on their site over time in terms of the desktop version of the site, because that's typically what the client, the merchant, sees most often is their desktop version. How do you handle that? How do you manage that client to make sure that changes and updates to the site moving forward are also mobile first?
All right, I've got to be honest with you, that is a really, really fantastic question there. And I think there's probably kind of two things that we need to look at there. I think the first one is about, educating the client and having good arguments for why it is that we are working mobile first and why it is that mobile is important to their business. And I think, even a simple bit of analytics and a simple bit of being able to say, hey, look, 70% of your traffic's mobile and 50% of your revenue is there. And then also to say, well, look at the other whatever percent that's desktop. Some of these people have actually been using their mobile maybe further up the buying journey just to maybe just do some initial research or compare some prices before actually then committing. So even some of those desktop purchases could be influenced by a mobile visit as well. So I think it's really about making sure that you can frame the importance of a good mobile experience in terms of the user journey to that client, but also in terms of the bottom line. Different people different stakeholders in the business are going to want to hear different stuff. So you've got to come at it from a few different angles in that respect. I think the second half of that about saying, well, the client's looking at it at desktop, that's what they see, that's what they want to know about. For me, that's about good client management. That's about needing to be aware of how they're viewing things and about making sure that you can try and broaden their perspective and get them to empathize with their customers. I see it as my job as a designer to be the user advocate in the relationship and to try and use research and use our our experience to try and convey that to clients and expand that worldview. A great way to do that is to when you're presenting designs is instead of just slapping them on InVision and emailing them off, have the client come into your agency, meet face to face, and then put some phones and tablets on the table and load the designs up on there and have them actually look at them on those screens and appreciate the constraints and the challenges there. And for me, that's real interesting way of getting them to empathize with the user and to maybe see what we're seeing as designers, and then have really positive, constructive discussions about that. That's one thing I can think of anyway to try and have that conversation in a good way.
Yeah, and that was a fantastic question. And Tom has another question here, and because with mobile experience, speed is such an important factor. Yeah, I'm going to elaborate on Tom's question a little bit here. But his question is, what's your go-to tool for testing mobile page speed? But I'm going to elaborate on that. I want to know what tools you use for testing page speed, but also what metrics are you trying to hit? Like what should be good mobile page speed metrics?
That's quite a tricky one. I think it's all relative. I think that's one thing we've got to think about. That you know, one client's fast is another client's not fast enough. And I think you know the simplest thing you want to be aiming for is to bring those page loads down to make them faster. And I think we've been typically halving speeds for people and more. In fact, we've been, halving them, moving people to Magento too. And then, the front end team's been going in, doing that unbundling, doing that smart loading, and taking it even further. So I think in terms of, one thing you always want to be able to do is just be able to benchmark your before and after and make sure that you are driving it lower. I think you've got to acknowledge, though, that performance is one of those areas where it really is about optimization, and it's about getting out what you put in. And it's definitely an area where I feel like it's a marginal gains thing that you're going to slowly, bit by bit, once you've done those big things, it's then about those fine details over time, and really refining it and continuing to invest in the site, but also to defend it from things that are going to slow it down. So, really looking at features and content that you're looking at bringing in as part of your roadmap, and maybe judging them against the benchmarks of where you've got the site down to, and maybe judge them against a performance budget, and saying, well, great, it's going to help us with this commercial KPI, and great, it's going to help us with this experience KPI. But if we have performance over here as another KPI, is it driving the other two up at the expense of performance? So I think it's about making, weighing decisions up in terms of the pros and cons, and making sure that performance is always there in the back of the mind. As you're designing, as you are making product decisions about the site, as much as when you're actually developing it. I think also in the question you asked about tools that we use, obviously, I think somebody from our front end and or back end team will probably be best placed to answer that. But I can tell you, there's definitely use of stuff like Lighthouse, of the web page speed tests, and something that we also throw into the mix there is a tool we've built ourselves, Browser Sync, which is incredibly useful at being able to very quickly test designs, coded designs across a range of devices, replicate actions, whether it's submitting forms or interacting with the site. But it also has the ability to simulate stuff like bandwidth for us as well. So we can be running the site locally on our machine and have it on several devices in front of us and be simulating a slow speed, say 3G connection. So sometimes, you might want to run those tests and have the raw numbers, but I think you also need to be able to sit there and feel the speed or feel the slowness. That's a key thing to bear in mind as well. It's not just the numbers, but actually to a person, what does that feel like? There's plenty of stuff out there to show that in some cases people will be patient if you can try and convey the delay in the right way, if people feel like work's being done. And actually sometimes being too fast is a negative thing, that people feel like, well, you can't have done anything there, like how can I trust that? We want to aim for fast stuff, and we want to make sure it feels the right kind of fastness, and that we're doing smart things in terms of loading stuff in in the right way. So we're not just trying to think about when does the content load in, but also think about when can we actually start interacting with that site as well. That idea is something I know where Shane, that I mentioned earlier, is quite big on at the moment, thinking about, great, we've got an image or some text on the page, but can we actually do something with it now?
Great questions, and keep the questions coming, please. The viewers always ask the best questions. While you're here, though, if you would, hit a thumbs up on the video if you enjoy what we're doing. If you're not subscribed, well, then subscribe. Like, that's pretty simple. I mean, if you're enjoying yourself, if you want to learn more about e-commerce, if you want to get more from your Magento store, or your e-commerce store in general, we're not all Magento specific, although we definitely have a Magento lean. I mean, it is the only brightly colored logo in the background, well, besides my logo. But anyway, you know, there's some great questions. We jumped right into some graduate school level questions there, and I haven't even gone through my third grade level setup questions yet. So it's going to feel a little backwards going back into my third grade level setup questions here now that we jump right into your awesome difficult questions. But I promise eventually we'll get back into some high level thought. But I'm going to go through my questions anyway. If you have better questions, then ask them, and we'll talk about what you want to talk about. But let's talk about mobile first design, and let's give a definition for everybody. You know, maybe some people, we assume we have a very technical audience. We try to have a very high level technical conversation here. It's probably not the best or most welcoming or accepting conversation for beginners, but you know, let's make sure we define things here regardless. So kind of give us your definition of what mobile first design is.
Yeah, sure. So I think really the term itself was, if not coined, definitely driven a lot by Luke Wroblewski's book, Mobile First, published by Book Apart. And, you know, he was really responding to the fact that that mobile web use was booming, was taking over, was becoming the dominant way that people access the internet, and for some people, the only way they access the internet. You know, not just mobile first, but mobile only. So that's really where the context in which that term comes. Now, yeah, you know, the clues in the name, mobile first, can simply mean, you know, designing for the smallest screen first. So instead of starting with the desktop, we're starting down on a smart screen sized thing. And the idea is to really kind of start by working out what's the essential content, actions, the experience that you want to put across to the user, given the constraints that you have there. Obviously, I've said smallest screen first, but we also maybe need to think about bandwidth. We need to think about inputs as well. So, you know, it's not just about the fact that we've got a limited screen space. It can be about other constraining factors too. And then what we're doing is we're using progressive enhancement to layer on features. Now, people might automatically think, okay, great, features, that sounds like, you know, really cool effects and things flying all over the screen. But actually, you know, its base level, it can be, well, when the screen gets wide enough, we're going to enhance the layout and have 2 columns for this product list. Or it can mean that, well, if there is a mouse available, we can add hovers to a menu instead of relying on taps. So really, it's about embracing progressive enhancement and working from that smallest screen upwards. But I think that's the design side of it. I think a lot of people, when they think mobile first, are thinking, okay, great, I'm going to sit down in front of Sketch with a really, you know, small frame like this, and I'm going to make everything fit in there. But I think we also have to think strategically. Like I said at the start, when setting that context, it's about the fact that mobile is now dominating traffic for a lot of e-commerce sites. It's starting to take over in terms of revenue share. And, you know, we've got to think about where mobile fits into the whole journey as well. So as I suggested earlier, thinking about How's it being used throughout the journey, not just for the purchase, but for research or maybe for advocacy post sale in terms of social media. We've got to think about where it fits along there, along that journey as well.
Now, a lot of merchants I talk to get a little confused about the difference between mobile first and responsive. If you would kind of elaborate on how, they're not necessarily two conflicting ideas, but how mobile first fits into the whole responsive design.
Yeah, that's yeah. I can see how both of those terms kind of emerging at similar times and having subtly different meanings can maybe be misleading to people. I think probably the thing to say is they are two separate things, but they complement each other really really well. With mobile first, as we've discussed, we're promoting a design approach, a design philosophy where we are starting small and then working our way up to the more capable devices. So it might be small screen to large screen, it might be low bandwidth to high bandwidth, it might be from, podgy fingers up to very fine grain mouse input. And that's really what mobile first is thinking about. So thinking about that progressive enhancement. What responsive design is offering us is a set of techniques, a set of technologies that allow us to actually do the adaptation along those scales. So something like media queries, for example, allowing us to change a layout, or something like responsive images, allowing us to bring in a different file for the screen size. So in terms of like practical application into how the two come across, if you were to do mobile first and use responsive design to achieve that, then you would write your base CSS to maybe be like a single column layout, and then you would write media queries to bring the grid in and take advantage of wider space as it becomes available.
And so, what's the benefit of doing that versus what most people have been doing for responsive design, which is what they basically call a graceful degradation, where you design the desktop version first and you gracefully kind of pull out features or trim it down as it gets down to mobile. What's the benefit of starting with the mobile version versus starting with the desktop, and kind of reversing that that thought process?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think one reason to do it is that the philosophy and implementation are aligned. They're both progressively thinking, if you like. You are thinking in terms of progressive enhancement, and you are actually then developing in terms of progressive enhancement. And really, the benefit there is you've got a more inclusive approach. You are starting with a lower context, and you're making sure support's really broad at that level. And then you are enhancing, you're optimizing as capabilities become available. This is just progressive enhancement, really. And the thing is, if you're doing mobile first and making something good for that, then everybody inherits that. Like a website that's fast on mobile is going to be, really fast on a desktop with a broadband connection. I think the other thing we have to look at is actually look at what we're talking about with graceful degradation, and particularly where we are thinking about cutting content or cutting features and functionality. And I think we've got to realize that a lot of users, particularly those ones I've described earlier, who are predominantly mobile users, they are expecting to get get an experience and achieve their goals on their phone. They're not expecting to have to switch across to a desktop to do that. So if we start cutting things out for them, then it fails them. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be occasions where the needs differ across the different device categories, and there may be occasions where you can look at your analytics and say, actually, do you know what? We can go the whole hog on desktop. We don't have to worry about mobile. But I think the reality for most people is that traffic and sales from mobile is going up. It's going to keep going up. And so it just makes sense to do mobile well and for it not to be an afterthought, not to be a, you know, a cutback version of what you could do on desktop.
Yeah, I know 21-year-old college students at this point that have never owned a desktop. And that's just amazing. I mean, they do everything on a phone or a tablet, and so that traffic's definitely, that trend is going to continue to increase. We've got another question here from Bartek in the chat, and his question is. Designer that I work with very often says that they can't really design mobile first because they don't see this from a creative point of view. Any advice on how to help shift to mobile first? So basically, they have a hard time being creative from a mobile perspective first. The limited point of view, right? Let's put all of these limitations on it, and then let's be creative. And they're struggling with that. Any advice for a designer that maybe wants to try to shift their mindset to produce mobile first design?
Yeah, I think that's a common criticism of the approach. I think particularly if you've been used to designing, really big, bold desktop experiences for users, and then are feel like really overly constrained by what you can do on mobile. I think there's potentially a few ways to look at it. Perhaps maybe don't look at the, that mock-up stage that of the design process as being the point to do your creativity. There's an opportunity to use a step before that and, use something like, use a broader canvas and, explore what's possible in terms of the branding and the the UI system, and just kind of be creative in that space, and then work out, okay, but how do I adapt this to mobile? So maybe what I'm suggesting there is not to try and go straight into that small canvas and just feel too pressured there. Like, go do your creativity first. Go work out what's going to be your those signature brand touches that I was suggesting in answer to the earlier question, and then look at how do you adapt it to the small screen. I think something to bear in mind is that if you are designing a mobile app, for example, there is no desktop experience. You are only designing for for the iPhone or for Android. You have to work within that space, and yet that hasn't been a limit on people's creativity. Traditionally, constraints are the designer's friend. They, shut one door, but then force you to try and open another somewhere. So I think it's an opportunity, if you want to be creative, to think about, be creative with what? Is it that, okay, you can't do massive graphics and big typographical treatments? That's gone. That's not an option. But what about interactions? What about, clever bits of animation or transitions and stuff like that? I think we've got to look at the broader toolbox in terms of what we can do in creating an experience for people, and look at maybe there's opportunities elsewhere to be creative.
Another question in the chat here from Dan. And Dan, thanks for watching. Thanks for your question. Do you work with pattern libraries, and how do you go about selling that to a client?
Yes, we use a few different things. We say pattern libraries. Everybody's got a different meaning of pattern library, design system, element collage. Everybody's got their own flavor and their own words for it. But assuming that you're meaning, say, a document, or be that a web page or a design file or something where you list out all of the UI components and all the different variants of that. I'm guessing that's what Dan's referring to there. This is, I think, a really important part of the design process, that we're not just designing, these static mock-ups for what the site's going to look like. Mock-ups ultimately just go in the bin once we've built the site. I think with stuff like pattern libraries, we have an opportunity to actually then document the design process to, okay, I'm seeing his clarification now. So it's an opportunity to document the design decisions to make sure that all the investment you've made along the way isn't lost in translation as you make that baton pass between the design team and development team. So it means that from a client's perspective, they're getting a much more consistent result. From the developer's perspective, they can be much more confident about what rules they do have to stick to and where they've got some freedom to break and adapt the rules. And I think another thing that we've found quite useful with this is that often once we launch a site, you've got to remember that in terms of who then maintains the design, who takes that site forward, it isn't always the agency that builds it. There's often people at the client end who are going to become, in some way, the future designers of the website. So it may be somebody in marketing producing graphics. It could be someone in the content team putting together landing pages. And so investing in something that's sets out the rules and good ways to combine things and suggestions on how to riff on it. It can also really benefit and empower those people as well. So for me, I see it as being really useful to kind of put that hand in hand with, some more general brand guidelines and with some design templates as well. Some sketch files or PSDs that have certain sizes and variables pre-configured for them.
Yeah, I would add to that just a little touch in that documentation's always a good thing. Always a good thing to document and to create those guidelines. I mean, it's ultimately up to the client as to whether or not they're going to adhere to them moving forward. But, selling that to the client is around educating them why it's beneficial and providing a story as to why they want to stick to those guidelines that you've put out there. So if your client's not sticking to those, either you need to work on the story you're crafting around why they're important, or you need to find better clients. That could go either way. That's a case-by-case basis. We can talk about that on another stream, but that was a great question, Dan. Please keep the questions coming if you have any. Again, we're going to go for at least an hour. We're at 53 minutes at this point. If you keep coming up with questions, I've asked them. I always tell them we're going to go up to 2 hours if people keep asking questions. If the questions stop, we may quit at any time at this point. So please keep them coming. We're here for you. My next question, again, we're going to go back to my third grade questions. If you want those college level, those grad school level questions, then ask them. What's the drawbacks of mobile first design? Like for anything, there's all of these benefits, but there's got to be some detriments to going down this path as well. What would those be?
Sure. So I don't necessarily see them as being, fully negative things. I think they're about being aware of these things and being able to manage them. I think we've already spoken about one earlier. From some designers' perspective, they may feel their creativity limited because they're used to designing on much bigger canvases and that freedom of just being able to throw stuff around there and see what fits. I mean, we're not talking about poster design when we're talking about mobile design. But I've already suggested some ways to get around that one. I think the other thing that's quite difficult is that there's a lot of emphasis on removing bloat and on prioritizing the content and the actions. And I think where you've got a project that might have, where the current site's been around for several years, and it's naturally built up that legacy of stuff just bolted onto it. That can be really challenging to try and work that out, and to take a client through that process, and help them work out what's going to work for them there. I think that's where it's so important to be able to bring, on the client side, to be able to bring their objectives into it and be able to make informed decisions about what's going to achieve what they want to do with the site. But I think it's also really important to be able to bring in the user's requirements. What are they trying to achieve? What are the questions they're trying to answer? To help do that prioritization and cut what isn't needed. But I think really, if the way we ought to look at it is, it's just a great opportunity for spring clean. It's a great way to get rid of content that's hard to keep updated, get rid of awkward things that jar, to streamline the site so it's going to help it run faster. So there's a few ways we can kind of to look at that hurdle of trying to cut it down, and see it as a positive way to a positive thing you can do. And I think maybe some people might look at it and say that okay, well, when we're designing desktop down, the mobile gets forgotten about. So surely if we're designing mobile up, we're forgetting about the desktop, right? And I think there's definitely the risk of that. There's definitely the chance that you might make decisions that limit what can happen on desktop, and it may just be that you don't give desktop enough time. I think really, you've got to be smart about where you invest your design time and where you optimize the experience. And I think you've got to think beyond those classic mobile, tablet, desktop breakpoints. You've got to, go do your research, go look at your analytics, go understand, not just, the volume of traffic on those devices and the share of your goals on your website, but also, again, as I said earlier, how the use of those devices fits into the user journey there, and make smart decisions about where you want to spend time smoothing out those breakpoints and optimizing the experience. And I think really, like, a challenge that I always try and set in the team is to think, okay, great, well, we've got up to desktop, whatever desktop is now. Let's say it's a 1400 laptop, for example. Okay, fine. But I'm sat here with a 27-inch iMac in front of me. And, what I'm talking about there is half the screen width. What could you do for me? What could you do at my end of the experience? So, again, I think this is where the kind of that kind of philosophy of progressive enhancement and of, well, we're going to start here, we're going to give everybody a great base, and then we're going to optimize the experience as new capabilities come in. To me, that just feels like more of a positive way of approaching it, and of embracing the different devices as they come into consideration, rather than, as we've discussed earlier, the desktop down, which feels like a lot more of a subtractive approach to things.
Another comment here from Dan Davies in the chat. He says, mobile first is the best way to begin with, as you prioritize content, which then follows through. And that kind of goes with my next question. You're approaching a design, a mobile first e-commerce design, like you're a lion stalking your prey. You're getting ready to pounce on this project and get started with it. How does your thought process differ than if you're doing a traditional desktop first design? Is that it? Is it you start with the content and you move from there, or are there other subtle nuances to how to go about mobile first design?
That's difficult. I'm trying to, to be honest with you, because of how long we've been doing responsive sites at JH, because of how long we've been doing stuff like modular design, modular build, using stuff like pattern libraries. It's hard for me to kind of, try and compare it with the other way of working. I think it's like Dan says, picking up on the prioritization thing. I think it's about maybe thinking about things you're going to have to do in your process to be able to do that prioritization. So, you've got to be more aware of content strategy and about planning how content is going to be organized. I think you have to be able to bring more research into it, be able to bring some objectivity into those discussions about prioritization. I think so. Those are two key things on the prioritization. We've mentioned speed already earlier. Thinking about speed all the way through from day one. When I'm picking fonts, I'm thinking, okay, is this too many fonts? Is this going to affect page load time? That's the kind of thing you want happening at the design stage, not at the development stage when they can start actually putting, real timings against stuff. I think, those are things that are kind of forefront of my mind. Otherwise, I think we're just, I think we could be trying to split hairs a little bit about the different approaches. I mean, I think a lot of the things that I'd recommend, I would say, are just good practice when it comes to web design, when it comes to e-commerce design. But yeah, prioritization, speed, thinking about how you're going to progressively enhance it are all key things there. And I think we're talking a lot about mobile first here, and about how do we prepare for mobile first. I think earlier on you asked me about progressive web apps and about are they going to be the thing next year that we're going to see in the awards. And I think if people aren't doing mobile first now, or haven't considered adopting that way of working, I bet they're going to find it the best way to approach progressive web apps. So that's why I'm confident we're in a great position to be approaching progressive web apps and to be putting some interesting solutions together there. And maybe I'd suggest try that different way of working if you're thinking of going that way. I mean, PWAs have got great benefits on desktop as well. I mean, Microsoft opened up some really interesting API stuff, so you can do desktop notifications and have access to some native things on Windows. But really, a lot of the the applications and the examples we're seeing right now is where companies are replacing their native apps with progressive web app, or complementing it that way. So if we're talking about mobile first and approaching that, I think we're kind of also starting to get into talking about how we're approaching progressive web apps as well.
Definitely, and we've been going for an hour here, people. If you don't have any more questions, we're probably going to be calling it quits here in a little bit. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button while you're here, and subscribe if you're not a subscriber. We've got a great live stream lined up for you next week. Actually, for the next several weeks, we have some very interesting live streams that I'm trying to pull up, and apparently I don't okay, yeah, it's a YouTube. I was going to pull them up. I was like, I'm forgetting who's what week and those kinds of things. But we've got Miguel Balparda on next week. We're going to be talking about Magento community engineering. Actually, sorry, that's in 2 weeks. Next week, we're going to have Mark William Lewis and Joseph Maxwell talking about Magento's minor release tactics and the Community Insider program. We're going to take the 31st off. That's Labor Day weekend here in the U.S., so we probably, unless just something comes up, we won't be live streaming that Friday. But on the 7th, we're going to have David Deppner and Brent Peterson and Adam Randazzo talking about how we can get more merchants involved in the Magento community and Magento events. So great lineup. Late September, we've got Blazing Fast e-commerce with Cloudflare. They're going to come on. They're going to talk about how to make your sites faster. And so great speakers, great lineup. And I'm checking the chat here to make sure there's not any more questions. Let's see. Dan said, desktop sites normally get designed with fluff to pad out space, or at least that's my experience. Then we just hide that stuff on mobile that's deemed not important. That's a great point. You put a bunch of crap in there, and now you got to get rid of it to make the site useful on mobile. That's yes. Yeah, that's hard to disagree with. So we've got one more question here we're going to take from Bartek, and Bartek's question is, how good/bad is the design of M2 blank theme in terms of mobile first? Is that a safe bet, or safe to base custom themes just to customize this theme when clients don't have a budget to go full custom? And I'm going to elaborate on that just a little bit. And there are a lot of merchants that Magento is a more expensive option, especially if they're going to go enterprise. They may be looking at some lighter SaaS platform. So whether they're open source or whether they're enterprise, sometimes budget is a big concern. And typically we like to base on those customers, we like to base the design off of the default Magento Luma theme. To save some money, and let's customize a few pages. In your opinion, is the Luma theme pretty good as far as mobile usability to use as a base, or should we be doing something different?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one, to be honest. Magento obviously, with the Luma theme, with Magento 2 wanted to be able to demonstrate Magento's ability to respond, the platform's ability to serve and respond to the this mobile first world that we're in now. And I think overall, I think the theme has a lot of design patterns that I think you'd expect to see in most good mobile sites. I think what we've got to think about is that we've got to remember that a theme like Luma theme is designed specifically to be, as you say, like a starting point for people, it's not opinionated. It's quite broad strokes in its design decisions, and it's also designed to show off the capabilities of the platform. I mean, really, that's no different to if we were talking about WordPress and the 20 whatever themes that comes with, 2015, 2016 themes. Those are generally basic vanilla themes that everybody can maybe project their own styling onto. So we've got to remember what the purpose of one of those base themes is for. Now, from my point of view, I'm very aware of, I can look at it and I can pick stuff out and say, well, I'd do that differently. And, that's not how I've done it before. But I think I'm coming at it from a point of view of designing specifically for the needs of my clients, of their catalog and their users. I guess have the luxury of being able to do a lot more bespoke work and really start from the ground up in terms of designing stuff. So I think, really I would, I think the thing to look at is to be kind of looking at best practices. If you're thinking, right, then I want to use Luma, maybe I want to do a little bit of work just to kind of not be using vanilla Luma, but actually take it up a few notches there. I think you definitely want to be looking at best practice around navigation, around page layout, about image loading. Those are all good things to look at, and to be keeping an eye on the work that's been done in terms of optimizing Magento and how it loads assets and how it can be made to run faster. I mean, there's plenty of stuff you can do in terms of caching and server optimization and stuff that's got nothing to do with the theme that will make your site load faster. So I would be challenging people to kind of look at that theme and say, okay, well, how can you make your version of that? How can you make your version that's got those little bit of something extra in there that means that you are giving people, taking people closer to what's a best in breed experience. I think if people are maybe thinking about, am I going to get right up to 3-time award-winning experience off Luma? It's possible if you really customize it a lot. But like I say, that's where we're talking about real in-depth customization of the theme, aligning that customization with the particular project.
All right, I'm gonna recap that. He said, "Yeah, you could do all right customizing off of Luma, but if you want to be a 3-time award winner like I am, no." So just a recap, just a recap.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got to admit, I've got that luxury, I got that privilege of being able to work on those kind of projects at JH, and that's what clients come to us for. They come to us so that they can have something that's tailored to their needs and tailored to what they want to achieve. But I'm just kind of, just trying to, recommend a way that, don't just settle for that starter theme. Recognize that it is there to be a starting point, but it doesn't have to be the end point for you. You can take what you learn and optimize for all your projects and build on top of it and have your own starting point.
Yeah, I think I shifted that to Luma when the original question was the blank theme, and Dan makes a point. Pretty sure Magento said themselves to not base off Luma, but to use the blank theme instead. But Dan, to that, I'll say, who the hell listens to Magento anyway? It's there. It's a lot less for a smaller merchant that is budget conscious. You need something with a little more layout, a little more usability. I think the Luma theme is okay for a low budget merchant. Like it's probably a lot. It's like you said earlier. It's probably better than what they have. It's an improvement. It's not about hitting a metric necessarily, more so than improving the situation that they have. And if they're on Magento 1, then just having Magento 2 with Luma is probably going to be better than what they were doing in the past, unless they spent a bunch of money custom tailoring that experience anyway. Have you seen the Vinya theme, the PWA theme that Magento has going on? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to preview it and have a look at it, and I think as I've mentioned so far, when we've spoken about PWAs already this evening, well, evening for me, afternoon for you maybe, that it's a good example of how they are, thinking about, okay, great, we've got a lot more freedom, we can do a lot more with the front end here, with the theme. How do we try and push this towards like a native feeling experience? How do we take design patterns and interactions from there and bring it into this PWA theme? And I think that's really interesting. I think that's, for me, where I can see a lot of PWA themes going in terms of e-commerce. So yeah, I'm really interested in, seeing where that goes, really interested in, the community being able to provide its feedback and input on that as well, because I think, that's got the potential to be the next, the next Luma theme, if you like, the next one that says, okay, this is what we can do with Magento. This is setting the standard now. And I think it's really important that, those themes are setting a high standard.
All right, so I think we've gone through all the questions. I think we're going to call it an afternoon at this point, or an evening for you, a night for you. I know it's late. I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing some info. Any parting shots before we call it a day?
No, not particularly. I think those last couple of questions where we're talking about talking about, well, what is best, and talking about, where should Magento go with stuff. I think those are really good questions to have. And I think it's really important that, that we, in e-commerce in general, but I think, in the Magento community, are having conversations about, what does good design look like? What does, how do we, create a great mobile experience, and so on and so forth. And I think, I'm here today, trying to share a little bit of what I know, and hopefully, with, with Adobe coming in and its involvement with Magento now, and with stuff like PWAs being so much about experience, that I think we're going to see the conversation about user experience, about good design. I think we're going to see that flourish in the community, hopefully. And whether it's on your channel here, TJ, or whether it's up on the stage at Imagine, I think we're going to see a lot more discussion about these topics going forwards.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you being on. I appreciate everyone watching. Again, we've got some great conversations lined up for the next few weeks. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up on this video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.